Good morning, Super Friends. This is Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Thursday, February 8th, 2018. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can subscribe to our Last Point Gaming YouTube channel. You can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow, or you can always reach out directly with an email to lastpointgaming@gmail.com. Doing a morning cast today because I missed casting yesterday because school was closed and they actually closed my office. They closed husband's office too, unfortunately not until 2 hours after he got there. Yeah, the winter weather here in central PA was real. But luckily for you all, I'm a little more awake than usual because the kids also had a 2-hour delay today, which means I'm going to be at work pretty late tonight. But, so it goes. I know I was going to talk about the Pro Tour, but somebody wrote one of my favorite types of articles, and so I'm going to talk about that. Thea, I believe it's posted on the TCG player site. I didn't know she was a writer for them. It's been shared out on Twitter by multiple people. I first saw it when Ross Merriam shared it and then commented on his thread, and I think I accidentally did a bad thing. Social media, increasing my chances to be awkward by 1,000 since like 1998. So, this is another sexism in the gaming community article. However, this one, if you're only going to read one of these things, read this one. I think she frames it very well. It is a bit of a long read, but I recommend reading all of it. Don't just skim it because you will miss key points, like where she 100% throws in there the not all men. And I'll admit, when I first started reading it, because she's, going through scenario, like, okay, you decide you're going to play competitively, and you show up to your LGS, and this happens, and that happens, and, as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my god, where do these women play? Because, I want to go knock some skulls around, because, this seems hyperbolic. And possibly it was. I don't know if she was relaying real experience that she had, or if it was meant to be hyperbolic. The article is, I think, called Death by 1,000 Papercuts, which is my favorite type of deck to play. But she, I think, does an excellent job focusing on things like benevolent sexism, things that aren't overtly bad behaviors. Too often these articles focus on don't fucking grope people. Well, duh, asshole. You're not reaching anybody with your article because anybody reading it and taking it seriously already knows that this is unacceptable behavior. Don't leer at people. Don't make comments about people's bodies. Yeah, this is all kind of common sense stuff. Whereas this article goes into a lot of the more subtle things that the intent may not be there. People say these things trying to be friendly, trying to be nice, and they don't understand why it's diminutive to women. And this is the kind of thing that I've been saying for a long time, that if somebody was going to write an article of this nature, this is the kind of stuff they should focus on, is the more innocent and innocuous behaviors that, especially when dealing with somebody new in the environment. It's one thing for one of the guys at the local shop, that I go to say something kind of off-key, and you'd be like, well, I'm sure you didn't mean it that way. It's a completely different thing when, you're in this environment for the first time. You don't know what the read is, you don't know what the climate of the environment is, and then there's these little things said, should you take that personally, or do they mean that in a hostile sense? And even if they don't, like, what kind of environment is this that, like, people don't realize? And really, one or two little, she calls them microaggressions, you can kind of shrug off and go, okay, I don't think they meant that. But once they start building up and you're seeing more and more of it, book 'em, Dano. You know, just every one of them erodes your sense of security and safety there. And that I can get behind. Now, as always, I don't think anybody should become too tunnel visioned on, we got to protect the women folk. I think we need to be aware of different people's sensitivities and watch out for everybody. What are you doing, cop? I don't think it should become about, oh, well, you get a brownie point because you stood up for a woman. Meanwhile, over here, this, you know, guy's getting ripped apart, and we're just going to let that happen because he's a guy, so he doesn't matter. No, I think bullying, harassing, any negative, aggressive behaviors like that should be dealt with. It shouldn't be a focus on, well, only when it's directed at women. Like, only sexism and racism is wrong. No. Being a shitbag in general is just wrong. And we shouldn't allow it in the community. But I do definitely applaud her in this article for taking on kind of a niche form of bullying, harassment, and discrimination in the form of sexism, that she doesn't focus on these broad, overt, negative behaviors. She focuses on things like asking, so did your boyfriend, husband, male representative in the world teach you how to play? A more appropriate question is, so where did you learn? But again, if it's not something you'd ask a male player, don't ask a woman. I mean, unless, you know, you're close friends and whatnot. In which case, well, none of this really applies, because if you're close friends, you know each other's boundaries and all that kind of crap. No, we're talking about surface interactions with people that you don't know. So, you know, pretty much every game, when you're facing an unknown opponent, you have the same discourse. How long you've been playing, where you're from, are you new to the area if it's a local game shop, if you're at a tournament, it's usually, so how far did you have to travel to get here? You know, what's your favorite format? You know, that kind of stuff. It doesn't need to be gendered questions. Asking somebody, you know, where they learned how to play, as long as you're not doing it in an asshole sense, like, wow, you fuck up a lot. Who the fuck taught you? I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but once you attach that qualifier of, so what male in your life taught you? Because by and large, the vast majority of people learn to play Magic from a guy. You know, that's kind of how it is, but I will say that the guys who taught me, I wasn't involved with any of them romantically. They were my friends from school. She does get into why there may be the discrepancy between the amount of female players out in the wild and the amount of female players that play competitively. And I mean, to a point, I can understand. And, you know, there is definitely a very small competitive female player community. I don't even count myself as part of it because, yeah, I don't know. I'm an aspiring FNM hero. You know, I go out to bigger tournaments from time to time, but only things within a day's travel distance that I can go there and back the same day. Except in the case of Nationals, since I got an auto day too, which sounds like they're changing that. I figured, you know, it was worth the nice weekend trip. definitely made it more worthwhile to go to that. But yeah, usually like Baltimore, it's about as far as I travel. You're not likely to ever see me in a featured match. But I can understand that the professional player community for women is much smaller. And husband and I actually talked about this after I read this article last night, and we were discussing that because I don't really see a lot of sexism, I asked him, is it because of the kind of woman I am? Is it because, I think I wore a dress to the shop once, and it was part of my, like, Halloween vague work-appropriate costume. It was a dress I wear to work from time to time. It had skulls hidden in the pattern. Yeah, so I wore a dress to the shop once, and yeah, there was definitely a moment from a few of my locals of, you're in a dress. It's a little weird. I know, right? Is it because I'm not overtly feminine that, like, I'm just one of the guys, and because there are, the Magic community is, by and large, like, roughhousey, like, people verbally roughhouse with each other. The problem is people will do this with players they've never met before. And, I've talked about this before, how, like, yeah, me and the guys trash talk on each other and we give each other shit, but we're friends, like, we know where the limits are. To do that to just random people that you're just meeting and be like, oh, you can't take a joke? Well, you don't know that person. So, my wonder is it just that there's behaviors that I'm like, yeah, it's just part of being part of the gaming community. Like, it's just the nature of gamers. And I'm okay with it. And where I'll separate between, like, well, I don't think you can call it sexism when it really doesn't matter to that player whether you're male or female. They're going to say it anyway. Going back to my insistence that if you want to call out bad behavior and want a kinder, gentler community, cool. Campaign for that. But don't call it sexism when it's directed at really anybody. And the reason I segued into this is we got to talking about how women do face certain pressures from outside of the community, which makes it that much harder when they're facing pressure from inside of the community. That, back in my day, being a nerd, like, wasn't cool at all. There just happened to be a large enough group of us in high school that was like, yeah, we don't fuck with them. And, the guys all accepted me. But there were definite societal pressures from outside of that group. Even when I first met, Grizzly's girlfriend, Grizzly being friend of Epidemic's way back in the day. We all used to hang around the diner. I used to work at the diner. And, like, the first time we were all hanging out there and Grizzly's girlfriend was with us, and we, go into this pointless discussion about, surviving living in the post-nuclear apocalypse world, and, what are your key objectives? And she's like, oh God, you're one of them. Now, she's now Grizzly's wife, and we get along. She's an artist, so I haven't seen them in a long time, but, like, I hung out with her a couple times, just the two of us, and she's a great girl, but she is definitely more of the traditional female role when it comes to gender roles. So we had to work a little harder to find common ground, but that first meeting of like, oh, well, now I understand why, like, you hang out with all of them, because you're one of them. Weird. And it's like that just initial moment of judgment. And again, you know, we managed to build a functioning kind of friendship around the fact that we were both connected to Grizzly. But you see that a lot as well. Even still. That the pressure may not be from inside the community. It's you're facing pressures from your female friends that are like, why do you do this? Like, this doesn't mesh with what society says you should be. And the thing is I've been shucking those roles off for a very, very long time. And that may be a lot of the reason why a lot of times when I see these articles about sexism in the Magic community, I'm like, dude, I don't get what you're talking about. And it's because I've just accepted that I don't conform to those gender roles for so long. And again, a lot of it could come from, yeah, I did see a lot more sexism way back when I first joined the gaming community, and I've seen the progress we've made. And so it's kind of a reverse boiling the frog kind of thing where, you know, I was in the trenches and shit was bad, and now it's so much better. And so I'm like, yeah, no, things are great. And I think Thea's article really focuses on a lot of more subtle things that people don't understand. And I think if you read it and you keep an open mind, because, you know, I understand if you're of the stance that this PC bullshit needs to stop and whatever, that you're going to read that already going in with the, well, let me find all the ways that I think she's wrong. But if you keep an open mind, you read through this article, I think you'll see that she's really making an effort to you know, even accept and say, like, hey, I get that people don't, oh, that's why we're all driving real slow. That people don't mean to be aggressive, that they don't mean to be offensive when they say these things, but you have to understand this is why it's offensive. Like, I actually reached out to her. Thea and I'm pretty sure, have gotten in fights on Twitter before. Like, had arguments and everything. Probably mostly while I was in with that bad crowd. And so I reached out to her. I sent her a DM. A lot of the reason I sent her a DM as opposed to actually publicly tweeting it is I had kind of a lot to say and didn't want to do the thread series of tweets on it. It wasn't that I don't want anybody to see that I'm saying this, because here I am publicly to any of my viewership out there saying that, like, no, I thought this article was really great. And I think it's well worth a read from anybody, you know, especially people that see themselves as not being sexist and, you know, don't appreciate being called sexist. Oh my God. There is an upside down car. Hope everybody's okay. That when you want to reach that crowd that, like, you know, really wants that inclusive, welcoming environment, and they don't understand that some of these behaviors that are innocent in intent, they don't broadcast that way. But anyway, so, you know, I sent her a DM and I was like, you know, hey, this is a really great article, and this is like the first time somebody's written one of these articles that I can even identify with. That I think it's great that you're focusing on these more low-key, innocuous behaviors and explaining, like, why it contributes to this, as opposed to going for, like, the big, messy, overt bad behaviors that pretty much any decent person looks at and goes, well, of course that's wrong. And she, got back and, also commented that she's pretty sure we've had interaction on Twitter before. But she's glad that, I read through her article. Yeah, she was really nice about it. She's great. I hate when people hold grudges. And again, a lot of that is when you have these discussions on Twitter where you're limited to, now 280, used to be 140 characters. It really makes it a lot more difficult to have a real constructive interaction, because you've got to boil it down. You've got to strip out the pleasantries. You've got to, really whittle down what you're saying into your main points. And so you can come across as kind of harsh. You can come across as kind of aggressive. And it is just the nature of communicating these things on Twitter. Ross Merriam posted a link to this article. He's like, read this. If you feel like this doesn't apply to you, read it again. And just keep repeating until you understand how, while it may not be your intent, he definitely summed it up much shorter. But it seemed to be the crux of what he was saying is, if you don't understand how this applies to you, I think you need to look a little deeper and understand that it's not always intent that matters. That your intent may not to be exclusive or aggressive or condescending, but that may not be what you're broadcasting. And I replied to his tweet with a comment of, man, I really need to bake cookies for the guys at my local shop, because every time I read an article like this, I'm just reminded how thankful I am that my local community doesn't fucking suck. And that's why you clean off your car, asshole. Giant sheet of ice just went flying from somebody's car in front of me. And my intent wasn't to marginalize what she was saying or being like, yeah, she's full of shit because my community's great. It was really the, some of these behaviors that she identifies that I'm like, yeah, I don't experience that. And some guy replied to my comment with, yeah, I fucking hate articles like this because it's like saying that all gamer men are awful. And I'm like, oh God, that's not what I meant at all. And then Ross had to reply to him, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to contribute to this. So I did go through and clarify. The guy did end up deleting his tweet, so now it looks like just a mess. A big part of it is the fact that I'm middle-aged and I'm not pretty. It's just how it is. I really throw off that mom vibe. So anytime we get new players around the shop, even male players, they seem to gravitate to me a lot because I'm identified as the safe, fluffy one. And I do my best to be welcoming and everything and help them feel like they fit into the community and, gauge the kind of person they are and everything. That this may also be a reason that I'm not seeing some of this more disgusting behavior, because nobody wants to try to get with me. So they're not practicing their alpha dog flirting skills, which, by the way, this whole, demeaning women to get them to want you thing, I don't know where the fuck guys get that opinion, but, no, it's not really actually how it works. Just so you're aware. But, yeah, my comment just, I don't know, I missed adding some context there, I guess. I think my local gaming community is fantastic, and I love them. It's one of the reasons I still play Magic. It's not so much the game, it's going out to the shop and getting to hang around the guys and, bullshit with them. But that's not to say that all communities are like that. And, we definitely have some not great sports in our community, and we're working on that. But, I also know that if anybody would randomly wander in off the street and try to start shit with me, that those guys would have my back. Like, I don't even question it. And until that sense of security is questioned and goes unanswered, that's always how I'm going to see it. Luckily, it doesn't get questioned. So, alright, well, I made it into work. I'm probably going to talk more about this evening, but I'm not going home from work tonight. I'm heading out to meet a friend, so maybe a short one tonight, maybe a longer one. I don't know. Depends on how things shake out. But as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to you all this evening.